evening. The one thing that the White House seems to have learned from its 2004 showdown at the hospital bedside of Attorney General John Ashcroft, the one that resulted in the near rebellion of all top justice officials after they refused to authorize the eavesdropping of Americans without warrants. The one thing the White House seems to have learned was to make sure it would never happen again. Not by complying with the legal concerns of the Justice Department, but by instead installing a new Attorney General who guaranteed to break whatever laws the White House might wish or want. Our fifth story on the countdown, not merely content to have signed off on the now infamous 2002 torture memo, Alberto Gonzales, in one of his first acts as Attorney General, approved a second secret torture document in February 2005, endorsing the harshest interrogation techniques ever used by the CIA. Gonzo, but not forgotten, the legacy of Mr. Gonzales continuing to stink up the joint that our nation has become. In February 2005, that Justice Department issuing a secret opinion on torture that provided, according to the New York Times today, explicit authorization to barrage terror suspects with a combination of painful physical and psychological tactics, including head slapping, simulated drowning, and frigid temperatures. Yet only 2 months before, when the Justice Department was still under the leadership of John Ashcroft, the Bush administration had publicly issued a statement saying that, quote, torture is abhorrent. Abhorrent, approved but abhorrent. The 2005 torture memo, like its 2002 predecessor, was written by the Justice Department's Office of Legal Counsel with the blessing and oversight of one man, David Addington, Vice President Cheney's then chief counsel, now his chief of staff. And in a sign of just how distasteful the Ashcroft Justice Department apparently found the legal stylings of Mr. Cheney, Mr. Addington and company, Attorney General Ashcroft having referred privately to the author of the 2002 torture memo, John Yoo, as Dr. Yes, for his seeming eagerness to give the White House whatever legal justifications it wanted. Once the 2005 torture memo had been drafted, Mr. Ashcroft's deputy, James Comey, who had stayed on after Ashcroft's resignation, telling colleagues they would all be, quote, ashamed when the world eventually learned of the document. At the White House today, Dana Perino not so much ashamed as in complete denial.
Under the United States interpretation, and and that December 2004 opinion that is publicly available at the Justice Department for everyone to see, we believe that we are following our laws and that we are meeting our international obligations in order to prevent attacks on Americans and our allies. And we're meeting that.
As for those international obligations, Ms. Perino believing the Geneva Conventions would be unconventional and thus entirely open to interpretation.
As I understand it, under the Geneva Convention, every country was supposed to interpret it for themselves. And now we have.
Time now to turn into Nixon White House counsel John Dean, the author of the new book, Broken Government. John, as always, great thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you, Keith.
The former Deputy Attorney General James Comey having warned colleagues at Justice that they would all be ashamed when word of this memo finally broke. Does the shame even begin to cover how they should feel? How egregious, how outrageous is it for the Bush administration to have publicly declared itself out of the torture business and then in secret endorsing and expanding interrogation techniques to make them harsher than the torture from before?
Well, I think, first of all, the former Deputy Attorney General was miscalling it when he said they would feel shame. These people, Keith, do not feel shame. It is not a reaction they know or have, or they would have had it long ago. The fact that they're now proceeding as they have is indeed outrageous, and I think that this is one of these issues that we will most all hope that Congress looks a little closer at because of the doublespeak that we're now being confronted with.
The White House press secretary, Ms. Perino, still smilingly asserting today that the administration does not engage in nor authorize torture. Is a circular argument, we're not doing it because we say we're not doing it, or even just trust us, is that still cutting it at this point?
I don't really believe it is. It's Orwellian in its logic. They're doing this with other areas, and they're just thinking because they say it. A lot of people will, in fact, believe it, but I think the overwhelming majorities now have lost all faith and trust in this administration and its ability to tell the truth. It's a sad commentary, and it may get worse before it even gets better, before they're gone.
John, 2 months before the secret memo had been drawn up, the administration had publicly declared torture, here's that word again, abhorrent. It didn't repudiate that stance when it redefined its interrogation techniques. Is it possible that we're dealing here not with duplicity, but some sort of dementia, that they really think this is not torture because they know that they are not the kind of people who torture?
Well, Keith, that would be a possible way to think, excepting for the fact they're trying to change the federal law that makes it a crime in the United States to engage in torture or to violate the Geneva Convention provisions. They've specifically sought exceptions in these laws. Not only should the Congress not accede to their request, they ought to extend the statute of limitations for another 5 years, make it a 10-year statute of limitations, so people would have vulnerability if these things can be surfaced and dug out, because it's the only way to make the point that indeed these are real laws, and if otherwise it's a joke to even have them.
Every time, John, that you and I sit here and we think we've gotten to the bottom of how quickly to the bottom this administration is taking not just their government, but the nature, the meaning of our government, we turn out to have underestimated them or maybe overestimated them. Do you have a clear picture tonight in light of what we saw in the New York Times today, just how bad this is, just how far from the United States of America of 1990, 1980, 1970 this government really is?
Well, let me tell you, one of the thoughts in conservative thinking in circles today is that they felt very bad when Ronald Reagan left office with a 60% approval rating. They thought, that's just a waste. They want their president to not be loved, to not be particularly respected. They want him to drive their agenda. And so Bush, as he heads on down with these kinds of policies being revealed, is doing exactly what the core of his party wants him to do. So it may well get down to single digits, and then he won't die rich, so to speak.
Nixon's White House counsel, John Dean, more recently and more importantly, author of Broken Government. As always, John, thank you for your perspective. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, Keith.